Hello and welcome back to the F1 Rearview podcast, where today we'll be talking about and reviewing the Styrian Grand Prix. I'm joined today, as always, by the wonderful Reese Keeble.
Hello, hi.
Producer Ruth is here as always as well.
Hello, welcome back.
And we're joined today by a special guest, F1 fanatic Sam. Hello, Sam.
Hello. Hi, Tom. How you doing? Hi, Reese.
Hello.
Hi, Ruth.
How are you doing? You alright? Why don't you tell us a bit about yourself?
Well, I'm good, mate. I'm enjoyed today. It's been quite nice to reflect a lot on the races. Don't get to talk about it as often as I would like. Arnie, my dog, who I live with, just doesn't respond when I talk about my F1 for some reason. But anyway, yeah, so I'm, like Tom said, a bit of an F1 fanatic. I'm currently a big fan of Hamilton. Button's always been my favourite driver throughout. In terms of teams I support, Mercedes, I'm just in awe of the team as overall. Their philosophies, their approach to work, the fact that they've changed the liveries of the cars to black. You know, everything about that team. They don't focus on who went wrong. They always focus on what can we do better. And they're my favourite team. In terms of other ones, Red Bull, very close second in terms of a team and performance. And I can see the McLaren badges. I'll be honest, I have been a fan of McLaren, although they were my biggest enemy with my old hero of Schumacher and the Mika Hakkinen battles of old. They were my bitter enemies. But again, I like the fact that they're a historic and successful team. But yeah, Mercedes, Hamilton, but true Button fan.
Well, it'd be nice to have a little bit of someone supporting Hamilton for once on the podcast, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Right then, the Styrian Grand Prix. Let's just start off going around and giving it a score out of 10 and a quick sentence about what we score it and why we think it's that. What do we think of the race? Reese, why don't you start?
I'll give it a 7 because I don't think. I mean, last week I give it a 12. We're going to go 7. Break up. Right, 7. Done. Move on. No, 7. It was quite good. I enjoyed the Ferrari smacking into each other. That was funny. I enjoyed Last Lap Lando, just proper going for it. Love that. But it's a 7 because he didn't get a podium. If he would have got the podium, it would have been a 13, maybe, or 14. But only
definitely no bias there then.
None at all.
Ruth, what about you? What do you think?
I'm going to give it an 8 out of 10. It was interesting to see how close the midfield is now. And it was just a very exciting race.
Okay,
Sam, let's hear what you think.
Yeah, echo what Ruth said. Definitely an 8, verging on a 9. I think couple of things. One, yeah, like Ruth, you said, the midfield being so close all the way throughout. Also, no, it was the fact that it was the second race at the same track, the differences between the two, and then yeah, it was a very exciting end to it all the way through. A lot of good direction as well. The director has been very good this season so far. Front sorted out. We all know it's where it's kind of going to go. So the director's actually focusing on that crazy midfield this year. There's bigger midfield as well. Even the Williams coming closer. It's just so good to see.
Definitely. I think
go off that as well of what you just said with the director, Carlos Sainz has actually had a couple of overtakes this season, like actually put on air.
Yeah.
Like, how amazing is that?
He's actually got visibility.
It's definitely been much better, and I think that is this season. I think we can all kind of already know that Mercedes are definitely the team that are at the top there, and they are going to be the ones to beat. So it is good that we have got that view on the midfield, and the midfield is so close because that is really where the points and the battles are going to be this season. That's for sure. I'd rate the Styrian Grand Prix a 7 out of 10. I think it was a pretty good race. There was definitely some great moves in there. I think the move Verstappen did on Bottas, just in that defensive, beautiful move, great move. Things like that really made this race really good. But I don't think it couldn't quite live up to the kind of 9-car carnage that we had last week with all those cars going out. So I think this week definitely was good, but not quite as good as the Austrian GP, not the Styrian Grand Prix. Well, let's start then in qualifying where the weekend began. There was questions as to whether it would even go ahead. We didn't know what it was going to look like. FP3 got cancelled, but they finally managed to find a little gap to fit the cars in, and we did get a full qualifying in the end. What do we think of that qualifying? I think that was one of the most exciting qualifyings we've definitely had for a while.
Amazing qualifying. Any qualifying that goes in the rain nullifies the car to a large extent and just shows off the driver's skill. And I think that's like to have Ocon actually where he was as well. That was good for him to see someone like that up there a bit. The only thing with the upsetting thing was that we didn't see Perez capitalise on what he did on the Friday. But yeah, Hamilton's lap though can't just.
Watching
it back was just wow.
There was a stat, wasn't there? Hamilton was 1.2 seconds from Verstappen.
Yeah.
Verstappen was 1.2 seconds from Vettel, who was in 10th place. So Hamilton was literally double the rest of the top 10 away from that. Amazing. That is an unbelievable stat. And you got to give credit to Hamilton. You know, you can hate him as much as you like, but when he does something like that, you can't say he's a bad driver. That is just pure skill.
Some people will say, the track was just getting clearer because all the cars are going around, but no, he was actually one of the only people to improve again. He was already 7 tenths ahead, and then when everyone else couldn't improve, Verstappen nearly did. He had a bit of a spin. It could have been a bit closer, but I still don't think he would have beat the 7 tenths.
Yeah,
it was the fact that Hamilton then went and did an even faster lap when everyone else started to struggle.
Hamilton was basically putting his 2 fingers up as he was going around the track at everyone. To be fair, he might as well have done, because that's how far ahead he was, and to do that extra lap, that little cocky lap, as I'd like to call it, because it wasn't really needed, but yeah, he did really well.
He knew he could do it. He wanted to prove it.
Yeah. I'm one of the people though who was quite happy that he got delayed by a while qualifying, because I was in work till 2:30, I want to say, or something. So I would have missed the start of qualifying, and then when it finished, I literally put it on my phone, sat the other side of the bar.
And froze.
What bit did you get up to? Essentially, happy it was delayed. I was at work, then I got a pint and sat the other side to watch it because it was delayed.
Yeah.
I finished work late.
Definitely was very good.
If you need me, shout me. I'll stop breaking up.
I'll tell you what. One thing though that was very dismal in that qualifying, that's for sure, was the Ferraris, and it was a dismal weekend. I definitely wanted to forget for Ferrari all around. They didn't even Leclerc didn't even make it through Q2. Vettel only just made it into Q3, getting it in 10th place. You know, Leclerc then got a penalty as well. It was just, it all went wrong for them, didn't it, in qualifying, and it didn't. That followed through into the race.
So I'm gonna return my F1 2020 because the first race I've just had, it was a Ferrari 1-2, so not realistic enough for me. It's going to be returned.
You've got a faulty game.
Yeah.
It's faulty. It's not cooking it.
I think that is. No one could have expected Ferrari to be as far behind as they are. I think a lot of people thought they would struggle. They'd be worse than Red Bull. But did anyone think they'd be worse than McLaren, Renault and Racing Point? You know, they are really down there, aren't they?
But you know what? I think it's actually a huge factor to why the races are becoming so much more enjoyable to watch, because you've got things like people like Racing Point, who are now the third best team, really. But you've still got McLaren and Renault. Even though Renault haven't really been scoring points, I think they could actually come back into this. So we know who the top two are. We know who the top one is. But
definitely.
Ferrari have just, they're falling apart. But it's what's actually making this a very interesting season.
It adds more of an entertainment factor as well, because you're too busy laughing at what the Ferraris have done in the first couple of laps to even realise what's going on in the rest of the race.
Yeah.
What's crazy is this is the first time there's been no Ferrari engine score a point.
Wow.
That didn't happen since 2015.
Yeah.
So no Ferrari engine got a single point yesterday.
Wow.
I think it's really interesting when you see one of the top three teams actually doing as bad as they're doing. It's like if you have Mercedes and they weren't there anymore, it'd be interesting to see who would take over from that point and who would be challenging at the front, which is what we see now. I think the cost gap will help with that as well.
Yeah, well, what's good to see, what's interesting is you say the cost gap. Ferrari don't have the cost element issue, but they're still failing. just highlights how well it's not just about money in this sport. You can go into football and you can be a Man City, import all the money in the world, and they'll win. But yeah, Formula One, you still need to. You're always going to have more than one team with money. You need to have the right team around you, and I think it's highlighting a fundamental flaw with the politics of Ferrari, which they've brought a couple of good people in, but it's got to change. Ethos has to change.
Right. So something definitely does need to change at Ferrari, but what can change? What needs to? What is the change? Is it Mattia Binotto? Does he need to go? Do they need a new leader? What is it?
It's definitely not a new driver. Yeah, I was going to say it's definitely not a new driver. Vettel's took the majority of the weight for Ferrari not being good. It's not Vettel's fault. He knows what he's doing. He just makes a couple of silly mistakes, which we've talked about in the last episode. We talked about how silly his mistake was to dive in and then manage to spin his car. As funny as it was, like the entertainment factor. However, it's definitely not Vettel's fault. If behind the scenes they get their act together and they stop fighting, I think you could say, then it'll be looking a lot better for Ferrari.
I think Ferrari have just got the mentality that they are Ferrari. They can't be bad. They're Ferrari. They need to pull their head out their ass and realise that actually they race is off. Actually, that they are genuinely. They need to fight. They need to be a top team, and that they think because they're Ferrari, because they've got that name on the team, because they've got all this money, that will just come to them. But it won't. They need to actually work for that, and that is a major issue, I think, for them at the moment.
What Benito said after the crash is that they're not looking for excuses. They can't, and you know what? They've got nothing to worry about excuses because contracts are already sorted. Vettel is probably gone, definitely gone. But he said we need to find a solution, not an excuse, and it's the pressure of there's always someone to blame. In Ferrari, it's always been a head needs to roll if something goes wrong.
Yeah,
that's why Mercedes have done so well and surpassed their 6 seasons because they've never had the whose fault is that. Toto obviously gets pretty pissed off when it goes wrong.
It's back in the table.
Anger's out. Right, find a solution. It's not blame Colt.
Exactly. Yeah,
that's what needs to change at Ferrari.
It's not a issue of it's your fault. You've made this error. You're out. And I think that's almost what's happened with Vettel. They've said, look, you've made too many mistakes. You're out. When in reality, they probably could have stuck with Vettel for a bit longer, almost put him into a Kimi kind of position alongside Leclerc. But they're not going to do that. And it's. Well, I was going to say, I almost feel sorry for Sainz because he's looking at that team now, knowing he's going there, thinking, "Oh, hang on,
don't want to. Why do I want to leave McLaren?" Sainz had done a really good job of forming McLaren around him. Norris has now taken that pedestal, and actually, the way Sainz responded in the race to let him pass, they're a really good team. McLaren have got a really good team.
Yeah,
and Sainz is a good position, and I think he's definitely going to be a number 2 next year. Unfortunately, he sacrificed a bit there, but
I think with Ferrari as well, it was interesting after the 2 Ferraris both went out how Charles Leclerc actually handled it. He held his hands up and said, "This was my fault. There was nothing Vettel could have done. It was completely my fault." And it was just really great sportsmanship to see that after the race he could just say, I made a mistake, it's my fault, which is what Norris did before as well.
Leclerc's the change Ferrari needed. He proved that last year. Last year they shouldn't have prioritised Vettel.
100%.
Like, he's the youngest F1 driver for God knows how long it is. They've made a good turn by putting Leclerc in there.
Actually, I think also that the mistake he made in that race, going for that move, was so unlike Leclerc. I don't think I've ever seen him make a move kind of that reckless, and it was so unlike Leclerc. Actually, I think it was Brundle on commentary thought it was Vettel. He first off accused Vettel of making the mistake, and then realised, hang on, no, that was Leclerc.
I think the Italians reported on that, saying Leclerc's still in the esports mode.
Yeah.
Ferrari, Vettel's past it, and Leclerc still thinks he's racing esports.
Yeah, minimal
I think
damage.
What you need to look at with Ferrari is, obviously, like we were talking about change and stuff, give the drivers orders, essentially, and make them follow it. So, have your driver 1, 2. As much as it's going to pee off Vettel being like, oh, you're our number 2 now, tell him that he is, and tell him that he's got to respond to the orders or else he's out, sort of thing. I mean, I know it's too late for that now, but if, like you said about the Carlos Sainz and Norris passing each other, incredible teamwork. They know that for the team to get a 5th and a 6th, I think it was at the time, or something like that, or a 7th and an 8th, it goes miles in the Constructors' Championship, getting them more money so that they can develop a better car. I know that it's not all about the money for Ferrari, because they'll always have the money there because they are Ferrari. However, it's just tell like Leclerc, you're number 1, Vettel, you're number 2. Leclerc, you can go past Vettel. Like Vettel, back off now, or else you're out. Essentially, that's what should have happened.
Mate, you're right. Every successful team has had to have that leader and better.
Yeah.
The only problem you get when you get to Formula One is every single Formula One driver believes they can win the championship. And you've got, even though they might take on the role of the number 2, there'll be a point where they can't. That's just the nature of an F1 driver.
I think it'll be interesting to see how Mercedes go this year, because I think Bottas is kind of fed up with being in that position. And I think as the season goes on, he's going to want to, say, hang on, I'm not as comfortable just letting Hamilton win these races because I'm fighting for this championship just as much as he is.
I think an interesting point as well is with Vettel, he hasn't got a seat at Ferrari. However, Haas have offered him a seat, which it would be interesting to see him in a Haas and how he would respond. I don't think he would enjoy it.
I mean, for Haas, it's a win-win situation. You're bringing in a 4-time world champion. You can get rid of Grosjean. Everyone's happy. But I don't know. It would be interesting. I think that if Vettel went to Haas, that would just him signing off his career. He knows he's going nowhere. He knows that's the end.
What I find the most interesting is that Bottas is, like you just said, he's probably sick of playing the second fiddle role, but he's very good at it to the point where he's practically finishing second in the championship every year for like the last 6 or 7 years.
He's only finished second once, hasn't he?
Has he?
I think he only finished second last year.
Yeah.
I retract that statement. However, he's a very good second fiddle.
He definitely is a very good second
he's
fiddle.
He's progressed to be the ultimate number 2, I think. I think he's never going to win the championship with Hamilton, not now. I think there was an inkling of a chance last week, because that's a big gap for a short season from the off. But yeah, Hamilton's just, put his foot down and just showed who's boss, really, hasn't he?
I think Mercedes have pretty much already signed their championship standings for as a constructor, because they're already on like 80 points, whereas McLaren, who are second, are on 36. They're already double points ahead of second place. They, as a constructor, they are invincible. I'm almost certain of it. They can. I do not think they'll be beaten anytime soon until they leave.
Do you know what's crazy is you've got the driver standings, not that. You've got Mercedes, McLaren, Ferrari, Racing Pony, and then a Red Bull. That's the top 6 teams. You've got Mercedes, then you've got McLaren leading in the driver standing, then Ferrari, then a Racing Point, and then a Red Bull.
And I think
that's crazy.
It shows that missing a race like Red Bull did last week, they came away with no points. That's going to really hurt them later on down the line, that they've had a race with no points from it, and they need to make sure that doesn't happen again, really. And they can get rid of any issues. Well, to be fair, I think today they definitely got rid of the gremlins and things they had last weekend, and they have managed to iron those out, because they did manage to finish, and reliability seemed fine. Interestingly, curbs didn't seem like they were an issue at all this weekend. I don't know if the drivers just need to keep off them more, or...
Although Verstappen's, you see Verstappen's wing?
Yeah, he did catch that.
That actually got caught, and they got caught in the barge board. They were saying that's why Bottas was actually able to catch him, because at one point he was going to be catching him on the last lap.
Yeah.
And then he managed to get quite a few. So the curbs did become a bit of an issue. What I was reading about the Mercedes as well, it wasn't actually the gearbox; it was a sensor issue. So that's actually not a problem necessarily with the gearboxes.
Yeah, it was a sensor issue that was throwing the gearbox into like anti-stall or something, I think they said. I'm not exactly sure. There was only 3 retirees, the other one being Esteban Ocon in that Renault. And Renault, he retired with the same issue that Ricciardo retired with last week. And also an issue that Ricciardo had in that race, which is why he couldn't push as much as he wanted to get past with Stroll again. Their engine is seemingly just really overheating. They have really bad problems cooling it, and that is definitely an issue that people are going to get back at Enstone pretty annoyed about. They need to work out why this is happening, because they've lost lots of constructor points. Like we're saying, Red Bull lost both points last week. Again, it's a very bad point toll for Renault again this week. In that midfield, it's going to be so tight. They cannot afford to be losing points like that.
Well, it's going to get to the point where if you look at next week, and if it happens again to another one of their cars next week, you can't say they're in the runnings to finish in like 3rd or 4th. But like I'm saying 3rd because of the way the Ferraris are performing. But you cannot say that they are in the running to finish 3rd or 4th, because they've had too many cars now not finish. Unless something happens, say to the McLarens like next week, where they both crash out or something. You've got to say that it's way too tight at the minute to be able to be making them mistakes because it's a short season.
Well, the only exception to that rule might be with the Racing Point. So obviously talking about Renault, have now lodged a protest against that Racing Point car. Very interesting. They've basically come out and said that's last year's Mercedes. Specifically, I think I've got it here. It's the legality of the outsourcing design to Mercedes for their rear and front brake ducts. So Renault have looked at that car and seen actually a lot of it is the same, but the bits they've specifically found to be exactly the same as the W10 from last year is the rear and front brake ducts, which is what the FIA have taken and said, yeah, this is a real protest, and they are looking into it. Obviously, we don't know the result of that so far. But what do we think of that? Do we think that's a fair protest or what?
I was going to say, I've got two things on this. One of them is that obviously me and you had the phone call the other day. Not that the listeners will know that. But me and you, Tom, had a phone call the other day about it, and we were saying that the FIA were involved in all of the design aspects of that car. So what can they find, essentially? So it feels like just lodging it because they're throwing this dummy out. But my other point has now gone out of my head. I can't remember the other point now, so I'll move on.
Very good.
I'll echo you what you're saying, Chris, because it's the equivalent of somebody going, that was a really good idea. We should have just copied some of the best features. Why didn't we do it? Damn it, it's too late now. Let's try and get it illegal.
Yeah.
It's just they're spitting their dummy out. They're not happy about it. I think it's been good for if everybody had the same opportunity, although that's kind of what they're protesting. If there's any inkling that Mercedes in any way helped them get the right design, other than them just taking photos, that's the debate. That's the issue. I don't actually think they've got a problem with people copying the designs.
Well, no,
definitely
that not.
Works.
Yeah,
that's Formula One in a nutshell.
Yeah, exactly.
Everything, it's just things going around. It's revolutionary. It is Formula One is always developing. It's just the teams can't help each other.
I feel like it's a team. The designers rolling the team is to look at what is the fastest and design one for their team. That is what they do. Yeah. Apart from at Mercedes, where they are the fastest and they then continue to find new loopholes. But for the designers in the midfield, they want to look at that Mercedes and say, well, why wouldn't we make that car? That's the best car on the grid. And you can't fault them for it because it's really smart. And I think it's their last season as Racing Point before they become Aston Martin. Obviously, originally it was going to be the last year of these rules as well. So they had nothing to lose by going for that W10 chassis. They had nothing to lose, only things to gain.
It makes sense. Money-wise, why spend millions of pounds on investing in a new, completely redesigned new thing for 1 year? Why would they do that? Let's just copy what works.
So what happens to them if they get found guilty? I say guilty, but if they get found to impede it, sort of thing.
So it happened in like I think it was late 70s. Williams did it, or somebody copied Williams. I think it maybe had been Brabham even, and I think it was before, but they said that you can't do it, so they had to give it back because it was copied or something. But they ended up building a car in 60 days and not actually missing a race. So if it is found, in theory, it could mean that they're disqualified.
They've got to drop out.
They've got to drop out or find a car.
Yeah,
or use their last year's car. They might have to use last year's car.
It was last year that Racing Point had Renault excluded from the race results, wasn't it? Because of something with their brakes or something along those lines.
It was
0.001 too much fuel on a qualifying lap.
Yeah,
or something.
It was I think it was the brake bias actually. I think Renault's brake bias got them excluded because Racing Point actually protested the legality of their brake bias in their laps.
Yeah,
they got them excluded.
Yeah, you're right.
So I mean, they've got history, and they are obviously they're rivals in that midfield. They both know they're both fighting for that third, fourth, fifth position that's between them, and there's a lot of money between that, so it makes sense why they do it. I can't see it coming back with anything other than the FIA saying, "Look, it's fine," like they have with the DAS, things like that. I think the teams aren't stupid enough to do something illegal. That's the thing now. These days, they know the rules. They aren't stupid enough to do something that's going to get them in a bad, fined, made the car illegal, whatever. They're not stupid enough to do that.
Ferrari's jet engine last year, maybe.
Well, Ferrari maybe, but yeah.
Ferrari just went like that.
It's also interesting that since they lost that engine,
we've come to a mutual agreement.
Yeah,
we're not going to do it, but we're not going to tell you why.
Yeah.
Right.
Put enough cash under the carpet.
I reckon if it does go bad, I don't think it will, like you're saying, Tom, because I don't think it would be good for the sport if it did.
Yeah.
And I think the outcome would be they'd have to revert to last year's car.
Or they just get a pretty hefty fine. I don't know.
I was going to say, in the way that the cars have been developing, then if they revert to last year's car, are they at the back of the grid?
100%.
Well, they'll still be better than Ferrari, I think. They're not as good as last year's car, apparently, are they, Tom?
I think it will definitely be interesting to see which direction it goes. I can't see them doing too much towards it. I think it would be a big step in the wrong direction for the sport if they did, because it's all about innovation and development. And if you're taking the best car, that's exactly what you're doing. You're innovating your team. I think it would definitely, because it'd be interesting to see how this carries over when they become Aston Martin, whether they still copy the Mercedes design or if they go for something original. I don't know.
Well, this rate, I think they'll keep the 2-year-old Mercedes. At that point.
Go for the W11. Go for this year's car. I'll tell you what, let's talk about Perez whilst we're on Racing Point. What a race did Perez have? I think Perez absolutely had a great race this weekend. He started P17, had a god-awful qualifying like we talked about before. To finish P6, what an amazing race from him.
Insane. I think both of them as well.
Amazing because...
Go on, Ruth.
Sorry. His qualifying last week was P6 as well. So it just shows that he's very consistent with the results that he's getting. So obviously he is a really good driver. He just hasn't had the competitive car up until this point.
Perez has always been a really good driver, and he's just not quite been in the right car at the right time. So his partner Button and McLaren, he did really well in Sauber and was going to overtake the Ferrari of Alonso at one point. That's where he really made a name for himself. Listening to Button as well, he's always been fast. Always been fast. His speed is good. And he started P17, finished P6.
Yeah.
Lance Stroll, by the way, also, if we talk about Racing Point, started P12 and finished P7, despite a couple of...
I think Lance Stroll has a lot to prove, especially now that his dad has offered Alonso his seat next year. Who else is his dad going to offer his seat to? He's got a lot to prove and a lot to lose next year as well.
Yeah,
definitely.
It's kind of funny with Stroll, actually, because he came in, his dad got him into F1 through money. But there's been a couple of times where he's actually showed he has got skill. It's not just his dad that's got there. He is still a good racer.
You look at
yesterday as well.
I think it was Monza 17 or something in that Williams. He got it on the front row in that qualifying. He did really well there. He got it on the podium in Baku, didn't he? You know, he's
Bottas outdragged him on the
on that final straight. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you know, he has had some great moments, and I think he is a great driver, and I don't think anyone can underestimate what he can do. I think he is kind of hindered by the fact that his dad bought him that seat. Yeah. He is a paid driver. I think that will always kind of be against him, but he is still a very good driver, and I think he definitely deserves credit for that.
Yeah. They're both very consistent drivers too, in the Racing Points, especially this year. I think we're definitely seeing that Perez and Stroll are both having consistently good races and qualifying too.
I disagree a bit there. I don't think Stroll's done very well yesterday at all. He got good position, but because of the car, a couple of things. But what he did to Ricciardo at the end of it, forcing everyone off the track. He makes too many mistakes. Stroll does.
I reckon
when he hit Vettel a couple of years ago, didn't he, on that warm down lap?
I reckon if you put Russell in Stroll's car, it'd be like watching a completely different car, essentially. That's my opinion on that. Sorry, Ruth.
Let's talk about Russell, actually. Great link. Whilst you're talking about Russell, what happened to him this race? Because he had a great qualifying, got that Williams to the best qualifying position it's been in since Brazil 2018, got it into Q2, got it up to P11 in the end with the Leclerc's penalty. Opening few laps, he was tussling with Magnussen, put it in the gravel, and then rest of the race he's just fighting with his teammate.
Yeah, so when I watched him go off, it was a case of, I feel so bad, but it was like, please be Latifi, please be Latifi, please be Latifi. Because I didn't want Russell to throw away that hard work that he did essentially on the Saturday. Yeah.
Well, is it a fact that Williams, maybe he's got all right qualifying pace and they can do all right in qualifying, but in the race pace, they're back to last year. They're back to the car that was last year. Yeah.
Like Haas last year could qualify well, race pace gone.
Yeah.
And I think it's two levels of development with a car. You can make a car quick on a single lap with a certain amount of investment, but it's qualifying and racing are two different things. They really are.
Yeah.
And like if you look at the end of it, all of the midfield were either finished on the same lap or one lap behind. Only the Williams finished 2 laps behind.
Yeah.
The Williams are still, unfortunately, too far.
It is really unfortunate to see.
They're better in qualifying on a Saturday. Race pace nil still.
I'd be interested to
Haas
see.
are doing much better as well. In this race, especially last week, they had issues with their braking. However, they finished 12th and 13th this race, which is quite good from Haas, considering how they were last year.
I feel like Haas, Alfa Romeo are kind of a little bit above Williams. And I think it's probably Alfa Tauri. Alfa Tauri, actually, I think, are a bit of a bubble on their own. They're a bit of a bridge team between the back and the midfield. Yeah,
they're a bit of a disappointment this year, Tauri.
They're not fighting with Red Bull. Not even Renault. Sorry, no, they're definitely not with Red Bull. They're not fighting with Renault. They're not fighting with Mercedes. Pink Mercedes, Racing Point. I'm getting my names confused. And McLaren, that's the one. But they're also not. But with the Hasses, they're very much in just kind of a bit of no man's land in the middle. Where did they finish? Gasly was like 15th, and did Kvyat get a point? I think Kvyat got 10th, didn't he?
Yeah.
No.
Daniel Kvyat was 10th and Gasly was 15th.
Yeah. So
I think there's less of a gap between their Saturday and Sunday.
Yeah.
But I actually think their Sundays are still the same. They've just got a little bit worse on their qualifying days.
Mm.
I don't know what's going on with I can't figure out.
It's very much a bit of a kind of a grey area there, and I think, yeah, the midfield will definitely be interesting to watch how it improves throughout this season. Because at the moment, it's very clear-cut. There's 3 teams at the front of the midfield really fighting for it. There's 3 teams at the back of the midfield really fighting for it, and then there's Alpha Tauri. So, very interesting to see how that goes, and I'm hoping it goes the right way. But you know, hopefully they can improve and get up there with Renault. But I don't know. Again, it will be very interesting to see. So obviously they had 2 podiums last year as Toro Rosso.
Yeah.
Didn't they? German and Brazil.
They had a good battle at Hungary next week. They're a really good battle last year, actually. Kvyat and Albon did quite a nice showing from.
Yeah. So, yeah, definitely will be interesting. Lando Norris, let's have a chat about Lando.
Yes.
What a bit of a boring race for the most part, to be honest. About lap 66, he was just kind of at the back of the top 10, not really doing much. And then, out of nowhere, he put his foot to the floor again in those last couple of laps, like he did last weekend, and absolutely was he was great, wasn't he? He got Ricciardo, Stroll, and Perez, I think, in the last 2 laps.
Mm-hmm.
What, you know?
Yeah, well, that's when Stroll definitely helped him a little bit there when he took Raikkonen.
Oh yeah, that bad move on Ricciardo. Yeah, definitely.
He never made the corner. That's why he didn't make contact, which is great, but he was never going to make the corner. That's why. Surprised it wasn't even penalised.
So with Lando, it was a case of, like I said, I was at work, so I was watching the highlights, and then I get a text through from Tom, all in capitals, saying Lando with about 4 O's at the end. And I was like, right, he's
Tom,
done.
You and Kev just screamed. Oh,
I was stood there, so I was like, right, so he's either done something extremely good or extremely bad.
Yeah.
So like when I was watching the race later, I was like, what's he going to do? Because I was staying off all social media. I didn't want to know anything to do with the race until after I'd seen the race.
Yeah.
And it was like you said, like lap 64 or something, or 60. Around then he was 10th. And I was like, well, he can't be doing some
freezing.
I was amazed if he got any of that. You know what? This internet, Lando good.
Lando good.
Let's go to the corner. What do we think of Lando?
And I think Lando definitely. He's still 3rd in the championship or something. He's having a great season, and I think this is definitely going to be one for him to remember. I think it'll be one of the best seasons we'll see from him for a while. But I want to know what's he going to do next year. He's doing these bits in this McLaren Renault, put a Mercedes in the back of that. Ricciardo's his teammate. I think he's going to be really good next year. Definitely best of the rest, if not up there.
I think the problem with Lando, and skillful wise, he's got the ability to be a top.
Definitely.
I think he's so. What we forget, he's so young. Hamilton was 22 when he started.
Yeah.
Lando's now in his second season now.
Yeah.
He's only 20.
Yeah.
So I think when you put him with a strong driver, he almost falls into the second place because he's still the kid.
He's the kid. Yeah.
And the reason he's been able to excel so much now is because Seitz is definitely like the more rounded racer, and the older. He's gone now, so he's not actually fighting against Seitz or having to. He's having to step up and be the leader, and he's comfortable actually. I think.
Well, he showed that in the first race as well, didn't he? When Sainz was trying to get past him, and he didn't bully Sainz, but they had like a little bit of a friendly competition, which did slow both the cars down slightly. But it didn't really matter, obviously, because of But it was good to see that competition happening. Whereas last year it would have been Lando give the place up, and then Lando gave the place up. You know what I mean?
You want to know something crazy about that lap? I said to you, Tom, last week, Lando deserved that third place. Even though he didn't finish third on the track, he finished fourth. Deserved third because he got the fastest lap. And you know what? That's 2 weeks in a row now that McLaren have
been fastest
lap.
It is, yeah.
I mean, like, by the way, I've got those times. Seitz did it in 1:05.6 on soft tyres.
Yeah. I felt Hamilton very nearly got kind of like a grand slam this weekend. Nearly got pole, fastest lap, and the race win. He didn't quite get it, but he was solid this weekend. But Sainz, where was he then? P9 was it Sainz in the end? I think it was P9.
I'll have a look for you now.
Yeah.
What's interesting about
P9?
You say Lewis Hamilton on the Grand Slam, by the way.
Yeah.
He is now, yesterday, a couple of great stats I love now. Won a race covering 3 decades. So he's won a race in 3 different decades. He's won a race in every single one of his 14 championships that he's competed in. And because he got pole at the weekend, he's had a pole position qualifying
every single
decade.
I was going to come out with that stat and look smart for once. I knew that.
Oh, sorry.
I think Lando definitely is going to be the next big thing. Lando and Russell and Albon, actually, they're all going to be up there. Definitely ones to watch in the future. And Aitken, we had another British driver at the weekend. Aitken got in that Williams for FP1, and actually he was pretty good in that Williams in FP1 as well. So that is good to see. A lot of British talent coming through.
Great Britain has, if you look at all the histories, we are the most successful country. Great Britain are in terms of motorsport, Formula 1 drivers.
Yeah. Majority thanks to Lewis Hamilton, but yeah. Right then, let's talk about Verstappen's re-overtake of Bottas. That is one I want to talk about. We talked about it a bit at the start, but I want to talk about it a bit more.
Yeah.
What a move. He pulled off that move so perfectly, and I think that will be definitely a contender for overtake of the season at the end of this year. What a move from Verstappen. So Bottas got past him on the straight. I think Bottas thought the move was done. Bottas was ready to keep going down the road. And then suddenly looks in his mirror, and there's another car around his outside on that turn 4, a very tricky corner, that turn 4. It's Verstappen. He pulls it brilliantly off through there, comes around the outside on turn 4, into the inside of turn 5. We were watching it, weren't we? And just losing our minds. I couldn't believe it.
It's because he did it there. Because that corner, I think we debated about, I know you talked about the debate last week, but it's kind of like you need to get you need to get it done before the braking zone, before you turn, because once you turn in, it's like you can't point of no return.
Yeah.
So there was enough space, and he did it. Bottas wasn't expecting it, but regardless of that, I think it's not just of the season. That's one of the greatest overtakes Verstappen will ever do in his entire life. Just how he managed to hold that, and he's like millimetre perfect. Because even that corner, people started doing it more, but you've got to be careful where you do it. Because Albon on Perez as well.
Yeah.
I think going again,
yeah.
would be 2 weeks in a row.
I think he definitely had flashbacks going around that corner with Perez. But I think for Verstappen, he knew full well the next lap round he'd lose it to Bottas. He was just doing that to say to Bottas, look, mate, if we were in the same car, if I was in that Mercedes, this would not be the same story.
Even the lap after, he's still going. Bottas covered him, but Verstappen was still like, I'm here. Back on the inside.
Doing the switchback.
He keeps them thinking he will never He will never ever let you switch off for a second.
Oh yeah,
that's why he is one of the greatest drivers.
He's going to go on to have a. Well, you say about them being young. Verstappen's in like his 4th or 5th season now, and he's only just the same age Hamilton was when he started.
Well, he had to. 17.
He was 17 when he's 17 years old. Insane.
In a car.
He didn't even have a road driving license when he started.
Nah,
it's insane. It definitely will be the one to challenge Hamilton in these next few seasons. I'm almost certain of it.
I've got a little topic that I want to bring up for debate, especially now that Sam's here.
Here we go. Is it Keeble's Corner?
Keeble's Corner. Right, welcome. Settle down. Get a drink if you want to. So, will Max end up leaving Red Bull in like the next couple of years?
So I think next couple of years there's a potential, because I think end of 21 is going to be very interesting when they bring the new stuff in. There's like sometimes you think, will he go now, because he's not going to hit Ferrari. They're not going to beat Mercedes. But it's a really good question, mate. That's a really good question, and there's arguments for him to stay, arguments for him to go. I don't think he'll go.
Well, Red Bull would like to think that they've got him at least till 2024, because that's what the piece of paper he signed says. So that's what they'll like to think. But you know, we've seen before, contracts don't mean that much in F1. If a driver wants to make a move, he'll make the move.
It'll be interesting to see what happens when the cost gap comes in, because I think that's the biggest thing that might affect him staying or leaving.
Well, the cost
and how
gap
that affects the team.
The drivers can still have limited pay. So that won't be a factor.
It won't be how much is getting paid. It'll be whether they can still have the same results.
Yeah.
With less cash.
The cost gap.
What would be good, interesting to know is to see actually it's got to be there somewhere. What money teams invest into it. Are Red Bull the most? I actually think they're not the heaviest spenders either. I think they're actually going to be a team that cope really well with the budget cap.
Definitely will be.
I think the worrying thing about the question that I've just asked for Red Bull is that is very much Max Verstappen's car. Like, they have built it for Max. So if Max leaves, what's going to happen? You know what I mean? Like, Max has obviously been in that car now, coming up for 5 years, I think. So it's a case of, like, you know, Christian Horner's put his eggs in one Max Verstappen-sized basket.
Yeah. Oh, yeah,
essentially.
Definitely.
I like that.
Well, interestingly,
you make a really good point about that, because it's why I think as well drivers really struggle against Max Verstappen, not just because he's the best driver that the team have, and there's so many people who are not on his level, but the fact that the car is it's Verstappen's car. You're right.
Yeah.
You see how finely tuned, and even he is on the edge of it in practice and qualifying, and it's a very hard, tricky car to drive, and it's been fine tuned to Max, who has the ability to live on that edge. Most drivers don't. He can, most drivers can't.
Yeah.
And that's why it's actually, if there was two drivers, like if, say we had Gasly and Albon in Red Bull, rather than Verstappen with that car, I think, they're going to be, they're not going to be a clear second. That car is not a clear second.
Definitely not.
And I think Verstappen is the one who pushing the Mercedes to have Verstappen to have that car as high up as the Mercedes are is just a testament to him.
Well, it's like I think Martin said it during the race yesterday. Like, he's pulling so much out of that car that he was splitting the Mercedes for the majority of that race. He was second place, and yes, Bottas did eventually catch him, but he was pulling more out of that car than Albon was. Albon was 30 seconds behind the Mercedes, more or less, towards the end. You know what I mean? So he really was pushing everything he could get out of that car, and that is something very unique to him, I'm sure.
It's a case of looking at Max's past teammates, because he had Gasly, who really struggled. Albon's kind of struggling now. Hey, it's the dog. Hi, dog. It's,
just look out the window, see what's going
on. So you had Gasly, who really struggled. Albon,
who froze.
He's had a pint again. The
Wi-Fi. I'm sick of it.
It's whenever you make a point, I'm sure.
I know it is. I'm going to look smart, and then it's like, no, you're not. Albon's not doing as good as obviously they'd want him to be doing in that car. Like, he is dropping back a little bit. He's doing it a lot better than Gasly. Daniel Ricciardo left because he knew that he was going to have to play second fiddle to Max. and he didn't want to do that. He wanted to be the number one driver. But then they were clearly building the car for Max, and he said that in interviews before, like that was going to be Max's car that year. So it's a case of like, do they have to have a look at it and go, well, we need to build a car for everyone, or do they? I don't know, because if, like, let's say hypothetically next season Verstappen goes, I'm off to Mercedes, see you later. You know, let's say, I don't know, like Bottas has given up his seat or something, and he's off to Mercedes. Like, you know, not that it's probably not going to happen next season. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But if it does, what do Red Bull do?
Well, interestingly, this is another story that came out this weekend, and not that I think it's to do with Verstappen leaving, but Dietrich Mateschitz, the co-owner of Red Bull, was there this weekend.
What's his name?
Dietrich
You just
Mateschitz.
swear. You told me not to swear.
That's his name. The co-owner of Red Bull was there this weekend, and he was talking to Helmut Marko about it, and he said to Helmut Marko, reportedly, I don't know how true this is, but he said to Helmut Marko, bring Sebastian home, and said, bring Vettel back to Red Bull. And Horner's denied these claims. Horner said that, I'm not interested in having him back, but I don't think Horner gets the last say, to be honest. I think it is very much the owners.
When it was the delay in the qualifying, they did go and speak to Christian, and Christian just outrightly said, no, he's not coming back. We're happy with Albon and Verstappen. He's not coming back.
Yeah, but if the big boys at Red Bull come back and say no, yeah, I think that would be a very different question.
I'll be upset with Formula One teams because that's not the right thing to do for the sport.
No,
personally, I personally think.
I think
Vettel would he be a second fiddle?
Oh, 100%.
Someone like Verstappen, no.
He wouldn't want to be, but Red Bull would say, if you want to come back, then that's what you'll do.
Well, then it's like what's just happened with Charles at Ferrari.
I think the only way Vettel will ever be in a team happily with a teammate, I think he will only have a teammate Hamilton. Personally, I don't think he'll actually be someone. I can't see him with a different teammate unless the teammate is definitely worse than Vettel. I think Hamilton is the only other person who can actually.
Well, do you mean like a Magnussen at Haas?
Not gonna have, that's just a weird dynamic.
I know.
The wrong character, wrong. Because actually, what you said about cars, but the only reason Schumacher has all of his championships from 2000 onwards is because that car was his car. That was he was really strong at. He was really good at making the car work for him.
Yeah.
And he had a number 2 with Barrichello.
Yeah.
He was the leader of the team. The car was his. You need to have a car that works for the lead driver. Well,
I think that can bring us on to our last point then of Mercedes. They are, as I think we all thought last week, they're going to run away with this season. It's theirs 100%. And, you know, Hamilton got that absolute blinder of pole position. And I don't think there's any doubt in anyone's mind that they are top. And Red Bull, I think, if they want to challenge them, they've got a lot of work to do to bring upgrades to that car in what will be a very short season to really challenge that title role. But we've still got 8 more races confirmed. We're off to Hungary next week. So what are our predictions for next week? We'll do our predictions just before the end, and we'll just say what do we think will happen next week. Pole and our top 3 for the race.
Before we
go on, Ruth. Sorry, hold on. Go on, Ruth.
So I think pole, definitely Lewis Hamilton. I just can't see any race going any other way at this point. Top 3, maybe Hamilton, Bottas. 3rd, maybe Verstappen, but we could see someone else up there if something happens to his car again, which it did happen again this race. It just wasn't as bad as the race before.
Reese?
It's hard, isn't it? Because last week I said that we'd have a Red Bull 1-2, and how wrong was I? So I reckon Sebastian Vettel's going to win it. Yeah. It's going to be on pole. I reckon it's going to be Bottas on pole, and then for my top 3, I want to say 3rd Perez, as much as that hurts, and then a Mercedes 1-2, but in whatever order.
So what do you think's going to happen to Red Bull?
Nothing. They just won't perform.
Just won't perform.
Sorry.
Interesting. All right, Sam.
They'll be like 4th, 5th, but
I think so. Final end result, I think it will be Hamilton, Bottas, I think Albon.
Oh.
So I think Albon does well at this track. So does Verstappen. But I think the only way it's saying Albon, I think there might be. I'm taking a punt that there might be Verstappen might trip over something, I think, this weekend, or there might be an issue. Or they'll try a strategy and it didn't. So I'm going to punt an Albon for third. I would actually like to see Perez up there, mate. That would be nice for him to get a third. But yeah, Hamilton and Bottas. Qualifying, though, I think that's actually going to be quite tricky to decide. It's either going to be Hamilton, and I'm probably 70% sure it's going to be Hamilton because, again, he loves this track. He's won 7 times here already.
Yeah.
And it's Hamilton or it's going to be Verstappen or something out the bag. I don't think Bottas is going to get up there. Unless the Mercedes are too far ahead then he'll be second. I don't think he'll beat Hamilton.
Interesting. I think it'll be similar to what we've seen this week. I think it'll be Hamilton. Hamilton will get pole, and I reckon Hamilton will win the race. I'm going to say Verstappen for second and Bottas third. I think Verstappen will hold it out this week. Red Bull will come up with a strategy that will, help them. I think they pitted Verstappen too early this week. I think that was the mistake they made this week. They pitted him too early and left him vulnerable to Bottas to go long. So I think they'll learn from that next week at Hungary, and I think Bottas third, Verstappen second. That's what I reckon.
Reese, I think we should do like a podcast review.
Yeah.
Like a Reese's review, a very short and sweet and concise. What do you think of this last week's race?
One
word.
Good.
Good. There you go. Thanks, Tom. Carry on.
Thanks, Reese. Thanks for that review.
It's all my Wi-Fi allows me to do. So.
Reese's review. Good.
Until Hungary next week, then that's all we've got time for. So thank you very much for listening / watching now the F1 Rearview podcast. I've been Tom.
I've been Sam. Thanks for having me.
Been Ruth.
And I'm Michael. See you later.
I love dropping that on you. It always makes it so awkward. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time. Bye bye.